anybody that is watching this should have already watched the previous video I posted, the Unabiker Speaks, where I describe it in more detail. Now, what I want to do today is just go over the file, show what it is, show what it includes, and talk about how to use it. So, obviously, I have image galleries. This is my French bike that there's more photos of it in here than the other bike, but I just, anytime I have a photo of something, I just throw it in here. So that's that. The Yoleo image gallery, the same thing. Most of these photos come from when I built the bike. Ritchie Logic bike doesn't have anything in it really to speak of, and I don't even have a tab for the Swiss Cross yet, but I will. And when I take photos, I usually just copy them into this file. There's also a photo gallery of the Unabiker, and once again, I don't do a whole lot with this tab. I just have a few photos in there. Um, Now this gets into the meat and potatoes of this file. There are, as you can see, quite a number of different tabs. It's a bearing chart with all the different bearing numbers and dimensions. It's just a good reference. There's maybe 20 of these tabs. The first one is a bike shop setup list. So if you're going to set up a bike repair shop at your home, this list would be really useful for what you need to put into it. Now, some of this stuff is stuff that I prefer to use, like the Shimano cassette hub grease, finish line ceramic grease, etc. Um, you may have something different. So what you're going to do is, if you want this file, I'll post it so you can use it. You're going to go through here and just delete all the information that I've put in here. But you don't want to delete any information that's in these colorful cells, because those have calculating formula. For instance, that number there is a total of everything in this line. So this is just general shop stuff that you need in your shop. Necessary, typical, common tools, tire tools, chain maintenance tools, crankset and cassette tools, frame cleaning equipment, supplies, and a list of useful cycling apps and websites. Now over here I have a bunch of notes I put to explain this. Now, I set this list up initially for a German friend, so he wanted to do this, and we had built a bike here for him. So I created this list for him, but it turns out it's a pretty useful list. Maybe somebody else can use it. Then I have a separate spreadsheet that records everything I did to build the Yoleo, the Ritchie Road Logic, and the Ritchie Swiss Cross. So up in here, this section, these are just summary numbers, totals of various subcategory costs and weights. So the total gram weight with tools, total cost. So it's useful to be able to compare and also to remember, how much I got invested in this. And then the bike build spreadsheet is broken down into different aspects of the build. Frame, fork, and seat post, headset, cockpit and saddle, drivetrain, group set. That's all group set, subdivided into two different types, because the Yoleo has Di2 on it, so you also need regular items that aren't electronic, the brake calipers mainly. Wheel set, front and rear wheel, tool kit, everything that's in the tool kit, accessories that you need, computer, lights, whatever, rear view radar, tools that I had to acquire to build the bikes, various other expenses involved like tax, shipping, duty fees. And then down here I have a handy reference for each of the bikes. What it is a record of total weight of the bike and of the rider on the bike that's necessary to do a tire pressure calculation for maximum, not maximum, minimum rolling resistance. And I get that off the Silka website. They have a calculator. Here's a chain length calculation with the formula, how to do it for each bike. I have a formula to calculate the length, and it works. This is also a record of tire circumferences for each bike. I need that when I'm calculating gear speeds for each gear on the bike. And then it explains it about tire circumference measurement, why. So that's that. Bike fit data. I have a spreadsheet for that where I have all of the different aspects of the bike fit and what those measurements were. So I have a record of that. All three bikes. So that's useful to be able to compare that. But also do it because I don't want to forget it. That's mainly the purpose of this, is if I don't write it down, I'm going to forget it. Now since one of the bikes has DI2, this is a tab I just developed today, in fact, so I can remember where to go to find out information about specific parts of the group set, dual control levers, and up here the Shimano website and also the website for the dealer's manual, which is what you want to look at. The user manual is garbage. Just ignore that. Go and get the dealer's manual. And I'm sure there's a similar thing for Campy and whatnot. But anyway, it breaks down my entire group set, the DI2 components and the non-DI2 components. And then I have reference website. If I have a problem with the battery, for instance, which I do currently, I got to remember how that battery charger works. And I'm always forgetting that. And how the little junction A control box works on the bike. When I press the button, what do the flashing lights tell me? Well, I never remember that stuff, but if I write it down, I can refer to it and I go, oh yeah, that's right. Bike geometry, all of the different aspects of the bike, a comparison from bike to bike. This is my old bike, so I use that as a standard because I rode that for 18 years. And then the Oleo, the Ritchie Logic, and the Ritchie Swiss Cross. Gear charting systems. This is a short article I wrote so I could teach myself what the various gear charting systems are. There's different ways to express gear ratio. Gear ratio is the simplest and probably the least useful one because all that is there's a formula how to calculate it. Chainring size divided by rear sprocket size equals gear ratio. Now those numbers are pretty small, 1.2 to maybe in high gear 3 point something. I want a bigger number than that so it's more clear. So what I use is gear inches. Now this just describes what gear ratio, gear inches, and the other gain ratio in meters of development. All these are different systems of charting your gears. And they're all somewhat different. And I think the point of charting the gears is so you know when you're shifting up or down, do I have to do a double shift at some point? Like maybe the gear ratio goes from 1.3 to 1.6 if you're on the big chain ring and you go from one ring to the next. but maybe you want a gear ratio that's 1.4. You might have to go to the small ring and do another shift on the cassette to get there. When you chart it, you see that written out clearly. But like I say, gear inches are bigger numbers. They're more like 28 to 128. It's just easier for your brain to see the difference when there's a 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 gear inch difference between one gear and the next. And then you get to learn if you start thinking about what gears you're riding around in, and then you chart your gearing setup on your bike. You get to learn what your sweet spot is. Like, I guess for me, one of the goals is, can I set up a gearing system that doesn't make me have to do double shifts? Can I design something? So I designed these gearing charts so I can analyze it. And I'm going to do a more in-depth presentation on the gearing charts because I think it's something important and people don't pay enough attention to it. And if you start using this, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a great analytical tool, and once you've analyzed things, you can then design the system that works for your riding style. Now I put 4630 in here for the chain rings and 1428. That's what I'm riding. And that gives me the gear inches, so you can see the spread from 28 to 50. And you can see the size jumps between the gears. It's like 3.5, 3, 3.3, 2.9. It's all around 3. So if you look at the gearing on that 1428, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, you've got all of those that are one tooth jumps. And then you go 2, 2, and 3. Well, if you go and look at some of these other gears, all right, here's a list of all of the different Shimano cassettes. Look at 1128, for instance, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then it jumps 17, 19, 21, 23, 25. So here's a comparison with 1428. All right. Now in the 28 on that 30 tooth ring, I've got 30, 46 in here. You can change these numbers. And all of the numbers in gray here will update immediately. Well, there you go. So if I go back to where I was, you see everything changes. That 34 column, everything updates. So this is what I mean. You can input any size chainring combination you want and any configuration of cogs. Now this is just a reference chart to remind me what Shimano actually has on offer. You can get a 1428, 1128, 30, 32. You've got these GRX cassettes. You've got, and notice that the chain rings apply specifically, okay, to a GRX 2x or a 1x. They're different. You can see that. So, yeah, I put a double column in here just because you can get a 40, you can get a 42. Then there's 12 speed. So that's just a reference chart to what's on offer. So if you want to actually chart your gears, you can refer to those and plug in the correct numbers and chart your particular gear. Now here's how I actually use that. all of these numbers, you see they're in color-filled cells. They all have calculating formulas. So you don't want to change this. You can change anything that's not a color-filled cell, and it will automatically update. All right. So when I'm charting my gears to plan gearing, I use these charts where the cog sizes are here and the cassette cog sizes are here. And then these, once again, color-filled cells, these are formulas. To change that or that or that or that, these numbers change. Then down here is reference for the circumference. That's based on a wheel rollout. Anyway, yeah, this deserves a more thorough description of how to use it, and I'll get to that not in this post. Then, in tandem with the gear charting spreadsheet, I have this gear speed spreadsheet, which if you once again input your ring size and your cog sizes, these formulas will calculate the speed you're going in kph and miles per hour, and then this is gear ratio, which you need that to calculate these. And gear speed also changes, obviously, if you change cadence. So if I change that from 80 to 90, all the gear speeds change. So I can see when I'm planning a gearing system like I did for my bike, and I put a 1428 in the small chainring, 4630, and that's really a very low high gear. I said, okay, well, I want to see what speed I'm in when I'm in that high gear. All right. And if you're doing 100 RPM, you're going pretty darn fast. Now, that's as fast as you pretty much want to go on the open road. Unless you're in a group ride, you're going to go faster naturally in these gears because there's the wind effect. But this doesn't take that kind of, the Peloton effect. This doesn't take that kind of stuff. This is just pure mathematics, formulas that assume if you're doing a certain RPM and your wheel circumference is of a certain size, then you make these assumptions here about what your cog size are and what your chain ring. All of this stuff just immediately calculates. Now down below here, I explain how that's done. These are the actual formulas you can use to calculate it. And there's different formulas, but they work out the same. So I did that for my Yoleo, the Ritchie Logic, and the Swiss Cross. Now, what's different? They all have the same, well, the Swiss Cross has a 50-34, but the Yoleo and the Ritchie Logic both have the exact same gearing, 1428 cassette, 3046 chain rings. So what's going to be different? But that's different on the Ritchie Logic. Why would that be different? Same size cogs, same size chain rings, same RPM. Well, the difference is it's a different tire circumference. These have 30C with tires. This has 25C. So I actually did rollouts multiple times to come up with those values, and I've tested them on the road. And whether I'm riding this bike or this bike, on the 30K loop that I ride again and again, the distance traveled is really almost precisely the same. It might be off by 20 meters from one to the other. Anyway, yeah. You use the gear charts and the gear speed charts to plan your gearing. So I could change that cog to a 34 and watch the upper row change. They all go. Now I've got a 32.6 low gear, and if I change this to a 50. The high gear goes to 96. It was 88. So you can see that 88, and then over here had a lower gear. Now I know that low gear will work for me anywhere in Thailand. Now Thailand has some good steep mountains, but I lived in Aspen, Colorado, and I didn't have a low gear that low. And my typical ride went from 8,000 foot elevation to 10,000 foot in a 10-mile ride. I was never in a gear that low going up that mountain. Now that doesn't mean I'm really strong. It just means that if I've got a gear lower than the gear I had on my bike in Aspen, I'm pretty good in Thailand. But what about high gear? 88. That's really low. Now, if this was an 11 tooth and this was a 50, it's now 112. Now that's normal high gear, okay, rating. So is 88 going to be sufficient? Well, that's where the gear chart comes, the gear speed chart comes into play, because I can see what my speed is going to be in that high gear, 4614. It's going to be 34 kph, which is 21 miles per hour. I'm going, well, that's assuming I'm doing 80 RPM. If I'm in that ring, why would I be in that ring to do 21 miles per hour? No, I'd be doing 105 to 110 RPM, and then I'm doing almost 28 miles per hour, 44 kph. I'm going, okay, that works for me. That might not work for you. That's why these numbers might be different from you. But what the point is between the gearing charts and the bike speed charts, you can actually analyze what works for you. Now, like I said, my CFOC French bike I rode for 18 years. I use that as kind of a standard, and I was in this middle ring. I had a triple ring because I bought this in Aspen, Colorado, and I was fat and out of shape when I did it. And like I say, every ride you take is uphill over a mountain pass. I realized after riding that bike and I got myself in shape, I was always in this ring, and it had a 1326. So you had, once again, really close one-tooth gear steps. And that kept me in that ring on almost any ride, except when I was going downhill, I'd be on the big ring and, the smallest cog, and it's my high gear. Okay, once again, doing 80. But if you're on a flat, if there's no wind, if you're not in a peloton, there's all those real world things that this chart doesn't do for you. What it does is it just shows you, assuming you're on a flat level surface and you're pedaling that fast and this is your gearing setup, that's the speeds you can expect to travel. Now, I've tested it on my rides and it's pretty damn right on. The formulas work, the calculations work. All you have to do is put this stuff in here. Anyway, enough of that. Riding pressure for tires. You need to know that. I don't ever remember it, so I created this chart. Once again, it's based on the Silka website, tire pressure calculation. And what they do is they ask you for a bunch of information. What size tire you have? What quality is it? Is it a high performance tire? Is it medium performance? What's the width of the tire? What's the weight of the rider plus all of his kit, plus the bike, plus all of the bike's kit, including filled water bottles? You need to know that. Once you know that and you tell it what size tires you have and whether you're on worn pavement, smooth road, gravel, poor pavement, gravel category 2, or on cobbles, it'll spit out tire pressure for, now this is my 4 different bikes, for each one of those conditions. Now I highlight this because the roads around here are worn pavement. They're in decent shape, but it's not like a smooth road. So these are the pressures I actually use. Once again, now this is a record of all of the clothes I wear, how much it weighs and whatnot. My bike weight, my rider weight, I'm about 76 now. So that changed. I'm going to have to go back in and I keep losing weight when I'm riding my bike. So these pressures will, probably be marginally less, maybe not even, because that's not a big difference. And I explain, how to calculate this. This website will just take you through it step by step. So that's in there. I have a record of all my torque settings for Yoleo, the Logic, the Swiss Cross. And they all differ, and I'm always fussing around on one or the other doing something. I'm going, okay, well, let me dig out my paperwork, see what the recommended Newton meters are for all these torque settings. That's a pain in the neck. So I just create a chart and write it down so I can refer to it. Now this, again, the list of all of the Shimano cassettes that you can buy, what their steps are on the cassettes, and if you plug in these numbers, it'll tell you gear inches for all of that. But this is the 1130. That's the information that tells you what Shimano gives you on an 1130 cassette. This is just added stuff that I put in there so I can look at it. I have the same thing for all the rotor cassette options, and it's probably in here for Campy, but I've probably hidden the rows so you can't see it because I don't use it anymore. I gave that bike away. I had Campanola on my French bike. And down here it tells you how to calculate, okay, gear inches, all right, which is what I use mainly. And it talks about what this is all about, so it's information. This is a spreadsheet where I record a formula for calculating the rear derailleur capacity. If you change your cassette, you might have to change your rear derailleur. It's not a given that the derailleur is going to work for whatever cassette and whatever chain set you've got. You've got to do the calculation. So this tells you what the formula is. And it's simple stuff. But once again, I don't remember all this stuff. I got 25 calculating formulas. I write it down so I don't have to remember. I got other things I want to remember. Formulas for calculating rear D capacity I don't want to remember. I want to refer to. So this is my reference. This is also the specs for the ultegra derailleurs, the short cage and the medium cage, how they differ, the total capacity. Interesting thing on a Di2 derailleur is the capacity is lower than it is on a regular ultegra derailleur. So there's a note to that effect right here. That's that. This is my template I develop for when I do a wheel build. Now, in this case, this Far Sports wheel build was a repair. And I had to buy a new rim, but I reused the spokes and the hub, only the rim got destroyed. So I took measurements of the existing wheel before it was destroyed and entered them in here. So those spoke deflection measurements for each spoke on both sides, drive side, non-drive side, and that's a record of the measurements. And then this tells you what the average deflection is for each side and how that differs. And you want those deflections to be pretty right on with each other. There's like a 5% or 10% variance that's okay, but the closer you get it to being right on, average deflection 1.99 millimeters, 1.96. That's pretty darn close. And then I did the same thing when I built the new wheel. I built it up, tightened up the spokes, got it true, got it so there's no wheel hop or wheel side to side lateral wobble. And I took the spoke deflection measurements. Now, on the rebuilt wheel, it's marginally tighter than on the original, small amount. But once again, you see in this case there was absolutely no difference from one side to the next in spoke deflection. They all worked out the same. And then there's a record of the hubs used, all of the specs you need. If you're building a wheel, you need to know the hub specs. The spokes I used, specs on the spokes, the length of the spokes used, nipples used, blah, blah, blah. And then some footnotes so I remind myself what some of this stuff means. Then I built a wheel, brand new set of wheels for the Swiss Cross. Did the same thing here. I got another wheel build coming. I'm going to use Kinlin, which is Taiwan company, alloy tubular rims. Now I wanted alloy tubular rims because they've got carbon ones. It's really hard to find alloy tubular rims. There's a company in Belgium, I think it is, called Head. They make it and they're quite expensive, actually. Well, Kinlin makes a really highly regarded alloy rim, and they're not very expensive. In fact, I bought them from a company in America and had a friend of mine pack them on the airplane with him when he came over here for a visit earlier this year. So I've yet to start that build. I've got all the parts. I just haven't found the time yet. And I don't need it. I've got 3 bikes to ride. This Kinlin wheel build, this is going to be a template, is what that is. I'll change the name of that so that it's an empty version, which I'll duplicate when I use, and that is the duplicate of that to make a new wheel. So I don't have to go in here and delete all this information. I could, it doesn't take that long, but having a template for your spreadsheet makes a lot of sense. Then I did a comparison of 105 and ultegra, different weights. This is a complete gear speed chart. It has every cog size from 10 to 56. And once again, it's just like the other gear speed charts. You have to tell it what the circumference of the wheel is and what the RPM you're riding is. So that's there. And then there's the bearing chart. Now I used this when I was changing the bearings on the Hambini bottom bracket I bought. Because one of the brilliant things I did when I fucked up the install originally was damage the bearings right away. So I took them out and I put some NTNs in there. And after riding those for a while, I, in the meantime, installed Enduro bottom brackets on the 2 new bikes I built, the Logic and the Swiss Cross. And I loved that. So I took the NTNs out and I put Enduro X15 angular contact bottom bracket bearings, which angular contact makes a whole lot of sense. Anyway, this is just a chart of bearing sizes and dimensions that you need to know. So for instance, 6802 here has a bore diameter of 17 millimeter. That's what goes on many bottom bracket spindles. And then 6.8, and what's the other one I'm using? I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm going to shut up because I can't remember. That's why I have this chart. I'll figure it out. Anyway, that's my bike notes file. I keep this file on my desktop here, and it's on the cloud, so I have it on all my devices. And when I'm playing around in the shop, or I want to add a new photo to the image galleries, or I think of a new item that I bought that I'm using in the shop, I'll add it. I'll update these things, and it'll update across all my devices. I use this regularly, but it's not something you're going to use every day. What I do use every day is a different spreadsheet, which I developed. Now, if you've got Strava or an account like that, you can probably get most of this information. But what Strava doesn't tell you, this is my different bikes. If I ride a bike, I put a number in that square on that day and then record the computer information in there. That's just me. I don't expect anybody else on earth to do something like this, but I've been doing this since 2019, and what's really useful is I created this companion spreadsheet, which charts about 10 vital elements of my ride performance over a month. These are all averages or total kilometers, whatever, month by month. So I can see the difference in my weight. I can see the difference in how much I've ridden and my weight. And that goes back, that's all of last year. And then when I get to the yearly totals, that's where I really start getting interesting information. Look, I was 76 kg on average last year. The year before that, almost 77. The year before that, almost 81. So, yeah, ride your bike. You get rid of some of that beer fat and drink more beer. There's no need to stop drinking. It's just a need to get on your bike more. Now, I have had a hard time starting this year. And last year was a big interrupted year too, so I didn't do nearly as many miles, kilometers as I did in 2021. But I had a lot of interruptions, things going on, and I got back on track. And that's a good amount of kilometers for this old man in 1 month. Now, if I rode more, I'd have more, but I did 20 rides. See, I was only on for 7 and 10. So I did more in 1 month in March than I did, and I'm intent on keeping that up this year. I want to get back in the saddle, so to speak. Anyway, this is also, I'll probably put this on the bike notes file where it was originally. But what I find is I refer to this spreadsheet, bike repairs and updates, often. So I put it on this cycling log, which I look at every day. But that'll probably be included in the bike notes file. What it is every bike with everything I did to it. What was the type of service, repair, waxing? You need to keep track of when you last waxed. I actually have built that into this spreadsheet here. This complicated stuff. I don't think anybody's ever going to use this. In fact, I wouldn't recommend it because I have to update it every month to roll it over. It's kind of a pain in the neck, but it's just indicative of the kind of stuff that Unabiker does. This, however, is very useful. I repaired the bottom bracket bearings, replaced the damaged original. That was the original replacement. I had to do something right away. I bought SEMA ceramic. Those were not the greatest things, so I replaced them with NTN and then replaced them with Enduro. And all of that's in here. What it was, how much it cost, what the source was for the part, if I had a part. And I update this every time I do something on my bike. Now, currently, I'm having to repair the electrical system on the Yolio. For some reason, it just stopped. Anyway, yeah, that's an additional thing. But this is the one that I'm going to post on YouTube. And if you're interested in it, I'll figure out a way to. I know how to convert it to Excel, and once I convert it to Excel, I can easily convert it to Google Sheets, and it will work. But I'm not going to go through the trouble of deleting all of my information. You know, this is all part numbers or little notes about the part. This is weight. This is cost for that group on down. So just remember how this thing works so you don't mess around with these cells that are either colored or gray filled. Those have calculating formula that make the spreadsheet work. Any of these white cells, you can enter anything you want in the white cells. It don't matter. It doesn't affect calculations. It just reflects your personal setup. That's how all the spreadsheets work. Okay. Anything that's colored has a formula built into it. Sometimes colors just are so I can highlight something, so that's not the same. This is all input, data input here. Get another example. Gear charts. Obviously, you're not going to change these numbers. You'll change cog sizes, numbers, and circumference. And some of these are just data entry. You can see when you click it, it'll tell you. Anyway, it's complicated, but I figured it all out. All you have to do is enter the data that's appropriate for you. If you want to use it, there you go. Welcome to it. Once again, thanks for wasting your time on the Unabiker channel. Now get on your bike and go for a ride. Good ride. Take care.